Victoria Hart woke to the gray light of a winter morning filtering through her bedroom window, the soft patter of snowflakes landing on the windowsill echoing the quiet tension in her chest. Even before opening her eyes fully, she felt the weight of the day pressing down on her, a day she had anticipated with a mixture of dread and resolve. 8 months pregnant, her body heavy with the life growing inside her, she had barely slept, turning over every possible scenario in her mind. The divorce hearing awaited, a public stage where her husband, Mason Hart, intended to humiliate her, and she had no choice but to face it. As she rose and moved to the living room, her instincts immediately picked up on Mason's distant demeanor. He was already there, leaning against the polished kitchen counter, his phone in hand, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. She caught glimpses of his screen, messages from Isabella Kane, the mistress he had been hiding for months, her name flashing in bold letters with emojis that felt like deliberate taunts. Victoria's heart sank, yet a spark of anger flared inside her. Every glance he gave the phone, every quick, hushed whisper that she caught, told her the betrayal was more than she had imagined. She wrapped her coat around herself, pacing slightly to ease the tension in her back, and tried to steady her breath. She reminded herself that today was not about fear, it was about dignity, about standing tall in the face of cruelty. She could feel her pulse quicken with a mix of anxiety and determination, every muscle taut with the effort to maintain composure. The snow outside fell heavier now, almost as if nature itself mirrored the storm brewing within her. Victoria took a deep breath, her hand instinctively resting on her belly, feeling the tiny movements of her child inside. The life she carried reminded her of her strength, of the courage she would need to confront Mason and Isabella. Despite the heartbreak threatening to overwhelm her, she steeled herself, vowing silently that no humiliation, no betrayal, would break her today. Victoria Hart stepped out of her car, the soft crunch of snow under her heels echoing through the quiet street. The winter morning had transformed the courthouse steps into a glistening sheet of white, each flake catching the gray light like a tiny spotlight on her path. Reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras poised and microphones ready, murmuring among themselves as they awaited the arrival of the Hart family. She straightened her back, lifted her chin, and walked with deliberate composure, careful not to let the chill in the air, or the scrutiny of dozens of eyes, shake her resolve. Every step was measured, her coat wrapped tightly around her, hands resting protectively on her swollen belly, a visible sign of her strength and dignity. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was cold and formal, the kind that amplified every whisper and glance. Victoria arrived first, taking a seat in the front row of the courtroom, her posture impeccable. She could feel the tension coiling in her chest, each heartbeat louder than the last. She scanned the room, noting the imposing wooden panels, the stern faces of clerks and lawyers, and the elevated bench where Judge Robert Sinclair would preside. Moments later, the doors swung open, and Mason Hart appeared, hand in hand with Isabella Kane. They moved with an ease that spoke of confidence and entitlement, their presence drawing immediate attention. Mason's smirk was deliberate, smug, and perfectly timed, while Isabella's poise and bold gaze announced that she belonged in the spotlight. Every movement, every glance, was a silent taunt directed at Victoria. She felt the sting of betrayal sharpen, but she refused to falter. Sitting upright, she met their gaze without flinching, the tension in the courtroom thickening as if the walls themselves anticipated the drama about to unfold. The scene was set, a battle of pride, betrayal, and raw emotion, all under the unforgiving gaze of the law. The gavel struck, and a hush fell over the courtroom as Judge Robert Sinclair took his seat, the stern authority in his eyes silencing even the murmurs of reporters and onlookers. "We are here today to hear the case of Victoria Hart versus Mason Hart," he announced, his voice firm, deliberate, leaving no room for delay or distraction. Victoria straightened in her chair, clutching the strap of her purse, her pulse quickening as she prepared to face the man who had shattered her trust. Every nerve in her body was taut, yet she refused to show fear or hesitation. Mason Hart leaned back in his chair with calculated ease, his elbow resting on the armrest as he turned toward Isabella Kane. A smirk tugged at his lips as he whispered something to her, the sound too quiet for anyone else but deliberate enough for Victoria to catch the gesture. She clenched her hands, the tension coiling tighter around her chest. The arrogance, the casual disregard for her presence, inflamed a mix of rage and heartbreak that she struggled to contain. Lawyers began presenting documents, outlining claims, counterclaims, and the terms of the divorce. The air felt heavy, thick with the formality of law but also charged with the unspoken drama between the estranged couple. Every exchanged glance, every whispered word between Mason and Isabella, made Victoria's blood boil. The way Mason's hand brushed Isabella's under the table, the quick smile they shared, it was deliberate, provocative, humiliating. Victoria's jaw tightened. She focused on her breathing, willing herself to remain composed, knowing that losing control would only give them the satisfaction of her humiliation. Her gaze flicked between Mason and Isabella, registering every subtle gesture, every calculated glance. The courtroom, cold and indifferent in its formalities, had become a stage for their betrayal, and she knew that the real battle, the battle for dignity and justice, was only just beginning. The courtroom was silent except for the monotone voices of lawyers presenting evidence when Mason Hart leaned toward Isabella Kane, and time seemed to freeze for Victoria Hart. The movement was deliberate, calculated, and brazen. Mason's lips met Isabella's in a bold, open kiss, right there in front of the judge, the lawyers, the reporters, and the spectators. A collective gasp rippled through the room, echoing off the polished wooden panels and high ceilings, breaking the rhythm of the legal proceedings. Cameras clicked furiously, flashes lighting up the space like a storm of betrayal crystallized in motion. Victoria's hands clenched into fists on her lap, knuckles whitening as her heart pounded violently against her ribcage. Every beat was an electric shock, each pulse carrying the fury and humiliation she felt coursing through her veins. Her stomach tightened with a mix of anger and the helplessness of witnessing her marriage being desecrated before the world, while she sat 8 months pregnant, unable to intervene. The betrayal wasn't hidden, wasn't whispered, it was a spectacle, and she was forced to endure it. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to breathe slowly, to keep her composure. Her eyes, however, burned with icy fury as they tracked Mason and Isabella. The mistress's smug expression, the way she leaned into Mason with ease and arrogance, made Victoria's chest tighten painfully. The whispers of the courtroom seemed louder now, the murmurs of shocked spectators and reporters forming a chorus that amplified her humiliation. Victoria imagined the headline flashing across every news outlet, CEO kisses mistress in court, pregnant wife present. She shook her head slightly, forcing herself not to cry, to remain a figure of strength in the face of open betrayal. Inside, though, a storm raged, rage, hurt, and disbelief intertwining in a chaotic dance. This kiss was more than a gesture of passion, it was a calculated act of cruelty meant to shame her publicly. Yet, amidst the humiliation, a quiet determination began to build. She would not let this define her. She would rise above the spectacle Mason and Isabella had created, and she would make sure they understood that dignity, courage, and truth could never be stolen by arrogance or betrayal. Victoria sank slightly into her seat, though her posture remained rigid, a mask of composure for the courtroom. Inside, however, her mind raced, replaying years spent with Mason Hart, a life that now seemed both precious and painfully fragile. She remembered the early days of their marriage, the way he had smiled at her with adoration, how his hands had felt warm and steady as they walked through quiet streets, the whispered promises made in hushed moments that had once felt eternal. She remembered the nights of laughter in their first apartment, the dreams they had shared for a future that now lay in ruins. Those memories collided violently with the present, where betrayal was displayed so openly, so cruelly, in front of a room full of strangers. Mason's kiss with Isabella was a blade cutting through the fabric of her past, leaving raw, aching wounds. The trust she had invested in him, the faith she had clung to even when doubts whispered in the corners of her mind, now felt shattered beyond repair. Anger surged alongside heartbreak, a fierce, consuming fire that made her pulse race and her breath tighten. She could feel the betrayal sinking into every fiber of her being, a suffocating weight pressing down on her chest. Yet amidst the pain and fury, clarity emerged. Each memory of love lost, every broken promise, strengthened a quiet, resolute determination within her. She realized that this confrontation would not be about tears or weakness, it would be about truth, dignity, and asserting the power she still held over her life. The storm of emotions, rage, sorrow, hurt, coalesced into something sharp and precise, a weapon she would wield when facing Mason. She would not be diminished by his cruelty. She would rise, articulate, and unwavering, letting the world witness that betrayal, no matter how public, could never erase her strength or the life she carried inside her. The doors to the courtroom creaked open, and Victoria Hart stepped inside, every movement deliberate, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Snow clung to the hem of her coat, the cold air from outside trailing her like a whispered reminder of the storm she had weathered just to get here. The room seemed to pause, the murmurs of the crowd dimming as all eyes turned toward her. For a moment, the soft rustle of papers and the monotone voices of lawyers faded into silence, replaced by the palpable tension her presence created. Mason Hart froze mid-smirk, his hand halfway toward Isabella's, his arrogance faltering as his gaze locked on Victoria. The casual ease he had worn like armor melted away in an instant, replaced by a flash of unease and uncertainty. He had not anticipated this moment, the full, undeniable presence of the woman he had betrayed, and he realized too late how completely exposed he was. Isabella Kane, usually confident and unshakable, faltered as well. Her bold smile tightened, her eyes narrowing slightly as she assessed Victoria's composure. There was no hesitation, no fear in Victoria's stance, only a quiet, unwavering strength that radiated across the courtroom. The mistress's confidence, carefully cultivated over weeks of manipulation, cracked under the weight of Victoria's power and dignity. Victoria's eyes swept across the room, briefly meeting the judge's gaze with a controlled nod, acknowledging his authority but making it clear that she would not be ignored or dismissed. She took her place, her posture tall and regal, hands resting lightly on her belly, a subtle declaration that she carried not only life but strength, determination, and an unshakable sense of self. The atmosphere shifted, almost imperceptibly but unmistakably. The whispers of the courtroom grew louder, reporters leaning forward, sensing the drama intensifying. Victoria's entrance was more than physical, it was a declaration. She was present, she was powerful, and she was ready to confront the betrayal, humiliation, and audacity of Mason and Isabella. In that moment, it became clear, the balance of power had changed, and the storm they had tried to create around her had just been met with a force far greater than either of them could have anticipated. Victoria took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying herself as every eye in the courtroom seemed to lock onto her. She could feel the weight of the room, the judgmental gazes of strangers, the flashes of cameras capturing each heartbeat of this tense moment. But she refused to let fear control her. She rose fully from her seat, her posture commanding, and turned toward Mason Hart. His smirk faltered slightly, the arrogance that had fueled him for months wavering under the intensity of her gaze. "Mason," she began, her voice calm but sharp, carrying across the courtroom, "I trusted you. I believed in you. I believed that the vows we exchanged, the life we built together, meant something. And yet here you are, parading your betrayal in front of the world." Her eyes bore into his, unwavering, leaving no space for excuses or deflection. "The messages, the secret meetings, the lies you told me every single day, you have humiliated me publicly, and you have betrayed not only me but the life growing inside me." Mason opened his mouth, likely to retort, but Victoria held up her hand, cutting him off with a quiet authority that left him frozen. She pivoted slightly, her gaze now meeting Isabella's. "And you, Isabella Kane," she said, her tone edged with controlled fury, "you think confidence and arrogance can hide the duplicity of your actions. But your presence here, hand in hand with him, is nothing more than a display of shameless opportunism. You have crossed boundaries, disrespected a marriage, and insulted the dignity of everyone present here." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Some gasped audibly, others leaned forward, captivated by the confrontation unfolding before them. The reporters scribbled furiously, cameras capturing every sharp inflection, every controlled gesture, every piercing glance that Victoria delivered with surgical precision. The tension in the room was almost tangible, the air seemed to thrum with the collision of arrogance and righteousness, betrayal and dignity. Victoria's chest rose and fell steadily, her fury contained beneath layers of composure. She had transformed her heartbreak into power, her betrayal into clarity. As she finished, the silence was deafening, broken only by the low murmur of witnesses and the quick rustle of papers. Mason shifted uneasily, realizing in that instant that his calculated arrogance had been dismantled, and Isabella's confident mask had cracked irreparably under the force of Victoria's unwavering strength. For the first time, they were confronted not with a victim, but with a force they had gravely underestimated. Judge Robert Sinclair's gavel slammed against the bench, commanding immediate attention and silence. "Mr. Hart," he said, his voice stern and unwavering, "this courtroom is not a stage for personal theatrics. Your behavior, including the public display of affection toward Ms. Kane during these proceedings, is utterly inappropriate and unbecoming of any individual appearing before this court." Mason's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. The gravity of the judge's words began to sink in, yet he tried to maintain an air of casual indifference, shifting slightly in his chair. "Objection!" Mason's attorney interjected quickly, raising his hand in protest. "Your Honor, my client." "I will hear no excuses," Judge Sinclair interrupted sharply, his gaze slicing across the room. "This is a matter of legal and moral responsibility, not personal indulgence. The behavior displayed undermines the dignity of these proceedings and the seriousness of the claims being addressed." The courtroom buzzed with tension. Witnesses, previously seated quietly, began to testify one by one, recounting details of Mason's behavior leading up to the hearing. Security footage, text messages, and even accounts from neighbors and friends painted a clear picture of months of secret meetings and deliberate deception. Each testimony chipped away at the facade Mason had relied on, exposing the depth of betrayal in ways he had never anticipated. Reporters leaned forward, pens and cameras ready, capturing every word, every reaction. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder, a mix of shock and fascination as Mason's carefully constructed arrogance crumbled. Isabella Kane shifted uneasily in her seat, realizing that her own complicity was being exposed alongside him. Mason's face paled slightly as he grasped the reality of the situation. This was no longer a private scandal contained between him, his wife, and his mistress. It had become a public reckoning, a legal and social judgment converging in one room. His smirk was gone, replaced by a hollow tension, and for the first time, he understood the full magnitude of his actions. Victoria, seated with quiet composure, observed the unraveling of his arrogance, a mix of vindication and restrained satisfaction flickering in her eyes. The courtroom, once a place of formality, had transformed into a battlefield of accountability, and Mason was finally facing the consequences he had long ignored. Reporters crowded outside the courthouse, their cameras flashing and microphones poised as news of the courtroom scandal spread like wildfire. Every detail, from Mason's brazen kiss with Isabella to Victoria's dignified confrontation, was documented, uploaded, and shared within minutes. Social media exploded with hashtags, trending topics, and outraged commentary. Headlines screamed of betrayal, arrogance, and public humiliation. CEO's public kiss shocks pregnant wife, divorce hearing turns into scandalous spectacle. The digital world magnified every misstep, ensuring that Mason Hart's arrogance and cruelty would be seen far beyond the walls of the courtroom. Inside, Victoria remained composed, her posture calm and regal despite the storm of attention surrounding her. Her strength and dignity did not go unnoticed. Spectators, reporters, and even onlookers outside the courtroom whispered in admiration at the poise she maintained, the quiet power in her gaze, and the way she had reclaimed control of her own narrative. Mason, in contrast, felt the sting of public exposure with crushing clarity. The arrogant, untouchable image he had cultivated over years was shattered in an instant, leaving him exposed and vulnerable before the entire world. Victoria felt a subtle shift within herself as the initial shock of betrayal faded, replaced by a sense of empowerment. She realized that Mason's actions, Isabella's arrogance, and the public humiliation could not diminish her worth. Each whisper of admiration, every sympathetic glance, strengthened her resolve. Isabella, once bold and unshakable, now struggled under the weight of public scrutiny, her confidence faltering as the consequences of her duplicity became painfully clear. Mason faced a new reality, the loss of respect from peers, friends, and even family, the tarnishing of his reputation, and the profound shame of his own choices. For Victoria, the scandal transformed into liberation. She felt a renewed sense of control over her life, her decisions, and the path ahead. The betrayal that had once threatened to break her became the catalyst for strength, clarity, and freedom. In the chaos of public exposure, she discovered her own resilience, proving that dignity and self-respect are far more powerful than arrogance or deceit. The world had witnessed her humiliation, but more importantly, they had also witnessed her rise. Victoria Hart stepped out of the courthouse into the crisp winter air, the soft flakes of snow brushing against her coat as she exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Beside her, Olivia Carter offered a steadying hand, guiding her through the crowded steps where reporters and onlookers murmured among themselves, many still snapping photos and recording video. Despite the media frenzy, Victoria felt an unexpected calm settling over her, a quiet sense of liberation that contrasted sharply with the storm of betrayal she had endured inside. As they walked down the icy sidewalks, Victoria reflected on the years she had invested in Mason, on the trust she had placed in him, and on the life she had once imagined. The anger, heartbreak, and humiliation were still there, but mingled now with clarity and resolve. She realized that her worth was never defined by his approval or by the cruel spectacle he had orchestrated. Each step she took felt symbolic, a small but significant assertion of her independence and self-respect. Olivia squeezed her hand gently. "You handled yourself with strength," she said. "They'll never take that from you." Victoria nodded, the words resonating deeply. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt in control of her narrative. The divorce hearing, Mason's arrogance, Isabella's duplicity, they were behind her. Ahead lay the challenge and promise of rebuilding her life on her own terms, embracing the dignity and empowerment she had reclaimed. Meanwhile, Mason Hart remained inside, staring at the empty courtroom with disbelief and mounting panic. The weight of public exposure, the humiliation captured by cameras and witnessed by dozens, pressed heavily upon him. Alone with the reality of his actions, he grappled with the consequences he had ignored for so long. The arrogance that had defined him now seemed fragile, hollow, and meaningless, leaving him to face a truth he had never anticipated. He had lost far more than just a wife, he had lost respect, control, and the foundation of the life he had thought he commanded. Victoria Hart sank into the soft sofa in her apartment, the familiar surroundings offering a comforting contrast to the cold, harsh atmosphere of the courthouse. Olivia Carter settled beside her, gently placing a hand on Victoria's shoulder. "You've been through so much," she said softly, her voice steady and reassuring. "But you handled it with strength and dignity. That matters more than anything else." Victoria exhaled slowly, allowing herself to absorb the warmth and support that Olivia offered, a stark difference from the cruelty and betrayal she had endured with Mason. For weeks following the hearing, Olivia became Victoria's anchor. She helped her navigate the practicalities of her new life, organizing legal matters, preparing for the baby's arrival, and managing the media attention that continued to follow the scandal. Beyond the logistics, Olivia offered a shoulder to lean on during moments of doubt or exhaustion, reminding Victoria that she was not alone. Each conversation, each reassuring word, became a reminder that the world could offer kindness and loyalty even when betrayal had felt absolute. As Victoria rebuilt her life, she noticed the contrast between her past relationship and the present support she now received. Mason had thrived on control, manipulation, and self-interest, while Olivia's presence was a model of compassion, honesty, and encouragement. Victoria began to reclaim parts of herself that had been suppressed, her ambitions, her confidence, and her sense of autonomy. She made plans for her career, started reconnecting with old friends, and allowed herself small pleasures without guilt. Amidst this reconstruction, seeds of new connections began to emerge. A colleague at her work offered genuine kindness, a neighbor's casual friendliness brought light conversation, and she felt a cautious spark of curiosity about the future of relationships that could be rooted in trust rather than betrayal. Victoria understood that healing was gradual, but the contrast between the toxicity she had left behind and the supportive environment she now inhabited was undeniable. For the first time in a long time, she felt capable of envisioning a future not dictated by Mason's arrogance, but shaped by her own choices, strength, and the love and respect she deserved. Weeks had passed since the dramatic courtroom showdown, and Victoria Hart now moved through her days with a sense of calm and purpose she had not felt in years. The snow of that bitter winter morning had melted into early spring, bringing with it longer days and the soft warmth of sunlight filtering through her apartment windows. Her pregnancy was progressing smoothly, and each kick from her unborn child was a reminder of the life she had fought to protect, a life that symbolized her strength and resilience. Victoria had rebuilt her routines, balancing her professional ambitions with preparations for motherhood. She attended prenatal appointments with confidence, arranged her home for the baby's arrival, and surrounded herself with people who genuinely cared for her well-being. Olivia remained by her side, a constant source of support, laughter, and encouragement, while new friendships blossomed, adding vibrancy and warmth to her once solitary life. Victoria began to embrace a rhythm that honored her own needs, her dignity, and the autonomy she had reclaimed from the chaos Mason had wrought. Meanwhile, Mason Hart and Isabella Kane faced the full weight of their arrogance. News of the public scandal spread far and wide, damaging Mason's reputation in professional circles and social networks alike. Isabella found herself increasingly isolated, her attempts to assert dominance and confidence collapsing under public scrutiny. Both were forced to confront the consequences of their actions in ways that Victoria no longer needed to endure. The humiliation they had once tried to inflict on her had, ironically, served to strengthen her resolve and clarify her priorities. Victoria often paused to reflect on her journey, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the ultimate triumph of self-respect over humiliation. She understood now that life's storms, while devastating, could also lead to unexpected clarity and growth. As she prepared to welcome her child into a world she was determined to shape with love and integrity, Victoria felt an overwhelming sense of hope. She had faced cruelty and emerged stronger, wiser, and unbroken. Her future was hers to create, guided by resilience, dignity, and the profound knowledge that she would never allow anyone to diminish her worth again. In that quiet, sunlit apartment, with life and possibility stretching ahead, Victoria embraced her new beginning fully, confident that the best was yet to come.